And now, here's your host of Shaping Success, Wes Tankersley.
What is up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of, I'll just call it Morning Coffee for now. One day we'll figure out a title. One day we'll get a new intro. One day we'll do whatever. But this is me and Robert just kind of talking about life and getting you guys motivated and what we're going through, what we're doing, and how's it going? What's good morning, Robert?
Well, good morning. I didn't make it to makeup this morning, so I'm gonna look. Oh, okay. Well, yeah, but look a little glow. You know what I'm really interested in is the concept of curiosity. I think people are not curious anymore.
Yeah.
I think they're content to let information and the world come to them, and they're not digging anymore. They're not trying to find out the why of things.
Yeah, I think that it's pretty easy to get lost in that, right? It's pretty easy to just say, hey, I'm going to move along and I'm just going to go with the flow and not try to do anything more because I'm content. I think that has to do with being content, right?
Yeah, I mean, they've either content or they've just decided to accept reality for what it is. And I had a great quote this morning, which it said, our past will show us what we've done, our future will show us what we've learned.
Yeah.
And the reality is if we're not curious about our past, what have we really learned? We've just lived it, right? But if we're not curious about why it happened, we can draw all kinds of conclusions that are not accurate or even close to representative of what we want in our future.
Yeah.
And so I couldn't figure out for the life of me why I was seeing this kind of echo chamber mindset in everybody. Like nobody could think for themselves. And I was like, why can't you think for yourself? And the reality was is they never were curious. They didn't dig. And so they were willing to accept whatever somebody said to them. And they went, well, yeah, that's the way it is. Why? Well, that was in a book. So lots of stuff are in books that are not right.
Right.
I mean, it's also too when we see generations past and we don't question, like they did this big project for the Greatest Generation of interviewing hundreds and hundreds of people so that they could get an oral history and not just to depend on historians to record things, but get an oral history of the people that were actually there.
Yeah.
Because remember, just because it's in a history book doesn't mean it's right.
Yeah. Well, and you kind of see like how that goes with a lot of things that are going on. Just because it's not right either doesn't mean that it didn't happen. Correct?
No, exactly. I mean, that's the reality is and here's the weird part. You can have three people at the same event see it three different ways.
Right.
Right? So what is history? What are we supposed to learn from our past? Is it a matter of our perspective? Is it a matter of our state of mind? What? I mean, perspective is such a big deal, but it has to come from some kind of baseline. There has to be some curiosity as to why things are what they are. A friend asked me about aging because I'm old. And she said, well, how are you dealing with aging? And I said, I'm working the problem. And she said, what does that mean? I said, I'm constantly working on the mix of what it takes to live a better, more successful life.
Right.
And she says, well, you don't have any answers? I said, no, I have what works for me so far. And she's like, she said, so you're never going to be there? I said, I don't think so. I said, because every day I get older, the problem changes. I mean, it really does.
Good morning, Lindsay. So Nikki said something. As I'm sitting here thinking about what you're saying, I'm thinking about perspective, and Nikki just drops this comment right as I'm thinking about perspective. But perhaps history is a mixture of fact and people's perspective who lived through the event, and that's it. It's perspective is a huge thing in that whole situation. Like if you dive into your perspective and you think about it, I think we've had this conversation before where it's like your and my perspective of what is beautiful, what is ugly is completely different. And so when someone walks up to you and says you look old, that's a perspective. That's perspective. Because to me, like I'm looking at you and I'm thinking about my family and my parents, and like you were about the same age as my dad. you look a lot younger than my dad because you do certain things and you work on those things and that's the perspective, right? We all have to
Mhm.
sit there and realize that just because you're the same age doesn't mean that you're going to look exactly the same. We've talked about Gen X, right? I feel like Gen X people have aged completely different than the generation before us and the generation in front of us because I don't know, it's just a weird thing, but we were raised in different times. We just do things differently.
Well, you ate different food to start
Hmm.
there. Your input is
Right.
very different.
Yeah.
I think for the first time, not in my generation, but in yours, where you've seen people starting to work the problem of what food they're putting in,
Right.
like mushroom coffee, right? I
Hmm.
just tried my first version of mushroom coffee. Okay, not bad. But it's people trying to work to look at how things might be improved. And the reality is they're kind of going back to the generation before us who had a garden in our backyard, right? Who got our cucumbers and tomatoes and green peppers out of your backyard,
Right.
right? And so there's always this kind of concept of renewal, but it's trying to better ourselves and being curious about what could do that, what could it make, what that next improvement could be, what is better.
Right.
And I think again, perspective allows you to decide what in the past has made sense or not made sense. But it's the curiosity to keep digging and realizing that you never quite get there. You're always working the problem.
Right. Yeah, and I don't. It's like you said. It's. I don't think that. I think that one thing that has helped us is like technology has helped us to find the ways to do that, to dissect that. Right. Like I saw someone the other day who had this scale where you just put whatever you're eating on there, and it tells you how many calories are in it. Because when
Right.
we sit there and we think about like what we're eating, right? Oh, this is healthy. Almonds are healthy, so we're gonna eat almonds. And you're like, oh, it's just healthy. But when you eat a whole freaking a whole little bag of almonds or whatever, the reality is like you're eating 2 or 3 servings of that crap, and you don't not crap, you know what I mean? But like you're eating 2 or 3
Yeah.
servings of that, and it's not right for you. And then knowing like what your resting metabolic rate is, knowing how much you can burn just by sitting on your butt instead of exercising, and knowing that you're putting in more here than coming out of there, and your output, your inputs are different, you're going to be healthier if you can count those and know those.
Well, it's also, you mentioned almonds. Which part of the almond is good for you?
Right.
Because it's the peel that actually has the really cool stuff in it, the outer skin.
Hmm.
I mean, again, it's all a function of beginning to learn how things work and then being curious about how things work and then being curious about your own body because each body is different in the way we adapt.
Right.
And it got, like, for example, I asked a friend, I said, she had allergic reaction to something. And I said, oh, okay, well, what are you allergic to? She said, what do you mean, what am I allergic to? I said, you haven't done an allergy panel with your ENT? And she says, what do you mean? I said, you're kidding, of course, right? You should have checked and found out what you're reactive to,
Yeah.
foods, etc. Well, I've never done that. I said, call your ENT and do a full panel. Why? Well, geez, you might want to know what you're reactive to.
Yeah.
I mean, we did this on all our kids, right?
Hmm.
Just so
Yeah.
they would have some kind of concept. Again, curiosity, right?
Yep. I have an appointment. I'm laughing because I have an appointment in 2 days to go do that for a second time. Excuse me, because like I struggle with the like right now I'm plugged up. It's like it's never an ending story. I've had sinus surgery, all this stuff, and things like that, and it's
Right.
like I'm dreading them doing it again because it's like I already did it. I'm going back because of what they like I've been pushed in the circle for allergies. It's kind of funny because I've been to like 3 or 4 different ENTs. They keep going back to allergies. And I'm like, finally, I'm over it. I'm just going to go back. I'm going to get the shots. I'm going to do whatever. And they're like, well, we're going to have to test you again. And it's like, why do you got to test me again? I'm allergic to everything except for pets. Just give me everything.
I'm allergic to dust. I'm
Yeah.
allergic to, you go through
Yeah.
this. No, I
Sagebrush,
totally get
weeds,
it.
trees,
Yeah.
all that crap. And it's like, dude, just freaking give it to me all.
Well, no, it's so funny because I moved from Houston, right,
Hmm.
to College Station, and you think I moved 88 miles north.
Yep.
I didn't move states, right?
Right.
But the allergens in College Station were ridiculous for me. I mean, I got to my first mile of my run and I was streaming like, oh my gosh, this is horrible.
Yep.
And people are like, well, you don't realize how bad allergies are here. I said, yes, I do. Well, what are you allergic to? I said, I have no idea, but I'm going to go to the ENT and find out. Well, it just so happens there's certain pollens that my body doesn't like. And I'm like, okay, I'll work with it.
A little more
But yeah, if
mesquite.
you don't know, oh yeah, so you just yeah, exactly. But you're battling through those things, and when you don't know, and someone says, "Well, what do you do when you get an allergic reaction?" I take Zyrtec. I went, "Huh? You find out what you're allergic to." I said, "Yes, I understand. You can take an antihistamine. I get
Yep.
that, but that's masking the problem. Why don't you
Right.
find out what you're allergic to?"
Yep.
And they're like, "Oh." I'm like, what do you mean? Oh, it's like why battle with things?
Yeah. I mean,
It's
and
just
that's
it's back to the curiosity factor again.
right. Yeah. And that's, I don't know. I struggle a lot because it's like my wife's kind of the same way. It's like, well, this hurts, this hurts, this hurts, this hurts, this hurts, this hurts. And it's like, okay, go to the doctor for that. Like my shoulder hurts.
Hmm?
Okay, go get it checked out. Maybe you tore something. Maybe you need to get that fixed. No, I'm just gonna deal with it. No, go get it fixed. It's like my knee. I had my knee replaced, but I had so many damn surgeries on that thing, and it was always one thing after another. And it's like, give me a cortisone shot. All right, it feels better. Like what are you doing to help that feel better? Because ibuprofen every single day doesn't help. It just masks it, like you said, fix the root cause, and ultimately got the knee replaced, and it's the best thing I ever did.
Right. But it's one of those things where you begin to look at it and you say to yourself, you know, why are you investigating? And the answer is so I can figure out what's going on. Somebody asked me, said, you're in pain. I said, yeah, I've been in pain since I've been 14. And they said, why? I said, that's when I entered competitive sports for the first time.
Yep.
And so, it's just the way it is. Somebody said, well, you deal with pain every day. I said, yeah. I said, but it's not pain as in I'm hurting myself. It's aches and pains as in I've used my body. It's
Yep.
okay, right? What you're searching for is not the ones that tear you up, right? Like you said, my shoulder hurts. You might want to go check. Make
Right.
sure you really haven't done any damage to it.
Yeah, and I mean it's funny because like my whole knee problems, like I can pinpoint probably where it all started, but it could have been the root cause of what I think it. Like I've asked my doctor about it a lot of times. It's like he's like, yeah, well, you could have adjusted your gait for that time. It could have adjusted the way that you walk. But my knees are knock-kneed. I'm not bow-legged. I'm the opposite. So I am someone who has that ability. Like it's more common for me to tear lateral meniscus, and that's what happened. I tore lateral meniscus and had it taken out, and that's the root cause of being overweight puts more stress on those joints. Doing things, being more active will cause that to happen. It's an overuse injury, and it's a genetic thing. So finding out those things that will cause you to make that happen can also be the root cause and figuring out how to stop it.
Yeah. Good morning, Steph.
Yeah, we got a lot of great
Yeah.
people in the chat room. Thanks for hanging out with us. We appreciate you being here. If you have not been here before, not every morning, every Monday and Wednesday morning at 5 o'clock, what am I, Mountain Time, 7 o'clock Eastern.
Yeah. I mean, the battle all the time with, that's the reason why you have a family history, medical history, right? So
Right.
you can at least look back and figure out in your genetics, what are you predisposed for? I mean,
Right.
it's just simple stuff, trying to just make your life just a little bit better, but it involves being curious, right? And somebody said, hey, well, my family doesn't really talk about that kind of stuff. And I'm like, well, you might want to.
Yeah.
Back to being curious, right? You might just want to have a conversation about, what was it like? What were grandma and grandpa like?
Ye-
What kind of problems did they have?
Yeah, and there's people who, you think about it, like there's people who don't even have that history, like people who are adopted. Like I think you said you were adopted, right?
I
You don't-
am, yes.
You don't know who your parents are, so you have to figure that out on your own. Sometimes you got to do 23andMe. My friend Jay, he's not certain. He's never met his parents. Like he's never figured that out. So he doesn't have a history of what happened. And he could have heart disease in his family. He could have a history of cancer. He could have a history of certain things that if you can catch them early, you can prevent them. Instead, now you got to go to the doctor all the time and figure out what's going on with yourself.
Well, it was funny. The 23andMe story is interesting because, of course, I did find my mother and my father, my birth mother and my birth father. But the most interesting thing was 23andMe. My daughter found my brother.
Uh-huh.
Okay, which was one of those interesting things where it was my daughter did her DNA test and she says, "Hey, you have this guy in Australia that is in your family heritage. He's more than likely your father's brother." And she was like, "Huh?" Well, it was a little known story that we didn't know, and we went back to find out that my father not only, of course, fathered me, but fathered somebody else. And he went back with his mother to Australia, hasn't been in the United States for 50 years.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter, right? That's about being curious, right? Being curious about your genetics, being curious about something and look what it does. Being curious puts you, I know curiosity killed the cat. Forget that part. The reality is we need to be curious.
Yep.
About our lives.
And I mean, it's kind of funny because if you're curious enough, you might be able to turn into Hulk, play with that gamma radiation.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because that in a lot of things that are going on in the world, if you think on a higher level, like you said, people take words or take the word of someone else. Like I can take your word for it, or I can go look and see, and I can figure out more and be curious about it and do a deep dive into what's actually going on.
Right.
Like the media these days, there's a lot of media stuff that gets put out there, and you don't see both sides of the whole situation. And it's funny. I don't go on Twitter a lot anymore, but if you really kind of want to know what's really going on, go take a deep dive into Twitter. And you might find that there's a lot of stuff that we do not see that the media hides from us. And it's crazy because you have to sift through what's real and what's not. But there's a lot of things that we never hear about or we never sees the light of day because they don't want you to see that. They want to control the narrative. And that's why I think that there's a lot of problem with people on Twitter because there's real stuff that's happening and we just don't get to see it. We only get to see what they want to show us.
Yeah, I mean, Twitter or X, excuse me, for right or wrong, it has a lot of, I know it, you got to catch up, right?
Yeah.
So you see a lot of things that are going on in the world and you begin to wonder, but see, here's the thing. I look at different news sources every morning and people say, "What do you mean?" I said, "Well, I look at the BBC every morning. I look at Al Jazeera. I mean, I don't take everything people say to me as gospel.
Right.
I look at the information, I look at the video footage, and I say, oh, okay, that's interesting. But the perspective changes. I also listen to one broadcast in German, so I get the German perspective, right? And so what I do is I get a chance to look around at different things, and it gives me kind of a sense of the world. I'm still very Texas centric and US centric in my thinking because that's where I live. Right. As interesting as it is, what's going on in Berlin is not as important to me as what's going on in Houston, more specifically, my little town outside of it. Right.
Yeah.
That's real. But do we want to see the bigger picture? Obviously. Of course we do. But again, you have to be a little bit curious.
Yeah.
You have to spend 20 minutes in the morning flipping through different papers, right? To kind of get some kind of sense of what the world is really saying and what's really going on. And it's also interesting. I read a piece this morning and it talked about, I don't know if you know this, but the Mexicans have worked to create a railroad system through the isthmus of Mexico that is equal to the Panama Canal. And it's their way of having a Panama Canal over land. What happened during COVID and stuff, also during a drought, the Panama Canal had to shut down the number of people that could go through, number of ships that could go through. So the reality is they need more help. Well, the Mexicans have created it. Most people don't even think, you have an alternative to the Panama Canal in Mexico? Yes, you do now. It finally made it after 6 years to the front page of the Wall Street Journal.
Yeah.
But I mean, I knew about it when they started it 6 years ago. But that's how information filters. Why? Because no one cares.
Yeah.
The average American doesn't care that there's an alternative to the Panama Canal, but it's actually kind of cool. I mean, they've done a great job. This was the last president, not the current one, actually completed the project. Now, how functional it is, I don't know,
Yeah.
but he actually rode across it, which is kind of
Yeah.
cool. Went from one ocean to another.
Yeah. It's pretty crazy that they can do things like that and people don't even know that it's happening. Like I had no clue about that. Oh, I'm going to sneeze.
Exactly. Well, bless you.
Excuse me. I'm sorry about that. I've been trying to hold that one off for a while.
But again, that's just kind of getting a sense of what's going on in your own hemisphere, right?
Right.
What's going on in our hemisphere? For example, we always love with the kids, we say, well, the kids don't know where Venezuela is.
Yeah.
Well, I doubt the average American does. But you
Oh, it's
might want
amazing.
to, right.
It's definitely amazing. Like I'm sitting there and good morning, Brenda. Thank you guys for hopping in here. It's amazing to see what is going on in this society. Like, I mean, I still, like my daughter still has not, she's in the 5th grade and still has not brought home homework one time. Maybe one time,
Wow.
but it was like an interview she had to talk to me about. So that's why she brought it home. Otherwise, nothing. And it's like, we had homework all the time. It never
Yeah.
stopped. It was like you couldn't get done in work. Oh, what happened? You didn't get done with your math stuff in class today. Well, you know, we get to do it tomorrow. I'm like, what? You get to do it tomorrow? Man, I had to take
Yeah.
that home. I had to do it at home. I mean, it's nuts.
Yeah. I mean, the demands, it's very different. And as I told you before, I had the opportunity to be an undergrad, a lot of years between the two. Let's
Yeah,
just call it a lot of years.
right.
And it was real different, right? 40 years ago, when I went to undergrad, they didn't spoon feed you crap.
Yep.
It was pretty much like, here's your thing, class starts at whatever. The professor would walk in, give you a syllabus, and start lecturing, and then walk out,
Yeah.
right? No reminding you that the assignment's due, none of that, right? Just here.
Yeah.
Attendance, they didn't care.
Even if there was attendance, like, I mean, you think about it, like
Yeah.
I remember some of the classes I had, like there's no way to take attendance in those classes. You do like Psych 101, which there's like 300 people in it in that
Oh,
class.
yeah.
They're not going to take attendance on that. They don't care. All they care about is that you're there listening. They don't even care about that. They could care less because they're going to get paid whether you pass or fail. It's up to you. So if
That's
you
it.
show up to that class and you don't listen to the lecture and you fail the test, who cares? They also
Yeah.
don't care if you're there and you pass the test. They just need your money. So you sign up for the class, you take the class, you pass, you don't. Who cares? It's just money.
Well, it's so funny because I went from having 20 people in a class in high school to Texas A&M way back, right? And the average number of people in my class, and this is not the auditorium version. This
Yeah.
is just the average class, was over 60.
Mm-hmm.
And I had the auditorium, like my chemistry, my biology, all auditorium,
Yep.
400 people in the class. So not only did you not have a discussion, you didn't raise your hand, you didn't do anything, man. You walked in, sat down, listened to the lecture, walked out.
Yep.
Again, no one cared whether you were there. No one cared, it just didn't matter.
Yeah. But do you think that we're preparing? Like, it's funny because I've had one class. I had one class in high school that maybe prepared me for college. One class. And it was because the instructor said, this is college prep biology and this is how college is. And he sat up there and he did hand us out a little sheet that had 5 talking points and it was up to us to take down the notes. And if we didn't take the notes, then that was up to us. But then he'd give us a unlimited multiple choice test at the end of each unit. Unlimited multiple choice. Yeah, strong. That just Oh, you mean essay questions? No, your multiple choice is unlimited. It's crazy.
It was, and then the weird part, of course, was going into grad school where, again, it was a completely different thing. Now your average class size is 8.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And you're on the hook for 100 pages of reading before you come into each class,
Yeah.
right? And they actually want you to defend your position. It's not an issue of regurgitation. It
Yep.
is. okay, they made this paper, they made this point, and you have to say, I liked it or I didn't, and then defend it.
Yep.
Critically thinking. And I'm like, and that worked for me. That was fine. But you could see the paralysis in the undergrads who had been used to just taking stuff in and regurgitating it. And all of a sudden they had to think critically, and they were frozen, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's what it is. Like the undergrad is basically just checking boxes. How many boxes can you check in order to, get this piece of paper that says that you listened, and then you get into the master's classes and stuff like that. Like my master's is 100% writing papers. That's all it was. And like you said, it's critically thinking, because you're dissecting the information that's given to you, and then you're putting down on paper how it relates to you, what you would do with it, how you would use it, and all those things. So you had to actually have some thought processes,
That's it. As I told somebody in my first semester in grad school, in the last 3 weeks, I wrote 25,000 words,
Yep.
which was a half of a novel to turn in. And that's normal.
Yep.
And you see it, and you realize that this is the beginning of you becoming the peers of your professors. And they tell you that once you graduate, you're my peer. I'm like, oh, cool. But that process reminds you that you have to be curious, right?
Yeah, Lindsay,
you can't stop in the face.
Yeah. Lindsay's saying, write it down, remember it. She tells her son, why, Mom? It's all right there on the computer. And this is, this was kind of my response, like when I was growing up. Hey, why do I need to know what 1 + 1 is? I have a calculator and it's going to tell me. Like, that was the thing. And, you'll not always have a calculator. And it's like, well, you're kind of wrong, but that doesn't mean that you don't have the base to make that work, right? Because we all have a calculator. I'm staring at my calculator right now, talking into it. It has a camera on it as well. And it's like, that's the problem. Now we've taught people that they don't have to critically think. They don't have to have the basis. They don't have to have all the tools that they needed in the beginning. And if this whole thing shut down, just like Nikki says, calculators can fail, what happens? What happens when we don't have the calculators? Who are going to be the people that they come to? Like, I swear, it's like, take me to your leader, the guy who can add.
Well, it's always, people always ask the question. They said, in your plane, you have automatic pilot. I said, I said, I have automatic pilot. I said, basically, the plane can take off for itself, reach altitude, come back and land, pretty much hit the same spot. And they said, why are you there? I said, when the computer fails.
Yeah.
And they said, well, does the computer fail? I said, sure does.
I'm going to leave you. I'm going to leave you guys with one thing, because we're about to wrap this up here. Great conversation this morning, but think about this, and I'll get Robert's take on it, and then we'll probably call it a morning. But what would happen today if, let's say, the government, or let's say something happened to the internet? What would happen today if the internet was shut down? Where would you be?
Yeah, in my case, that wouldn't bother me in the least. I have books.
Right. Right.
But for as far as everybody else is concerned, their knowledge base would go way down.
Yeah, you guys are hosed. What are we gonna do? Just think about that, and that's what I think that like that really puts a perspective on things. What would happen today? We would all be hosed, because that's where we go, right? Like, anytime we want some knowledge on anything, what we do is we're just like, oh, I'm going to go to Google. I'm going to look that up. What do you do? So,
Yep.
Great conversation. Be curious today. Think about those things. Start to kind of, mold your mind into being questionable, to question things, question everything, because nothing is for real.
No.
Oh, man.
Have a wonderful Monday.
Yep. All right. Thanks, Robert. Thank you, everyone, for hanging out. We will see you Wednesday back into RS Victorious. On Wednesday, we'll talk about that, which kind of leads into just some regular conversations. But until then, we'll see you.
Take care.